Hello students, welcome to Notebook. Remember the last time you had to convince your parents of something? How did you go about it? This is how Neha faced the situation. Neha's examinations were about to start in a week when the film Black Panther released. She knew that her parents would never allow her to waste her Friday evening at the theatre when she had sums to practice and more mock question papers to solve. It would be especially difficult to convince her mother, but she wanted to watch the film anyway. So what did she do? She read up about Black Panther and then made up a story about how watching the film would actually help her answer questions in the science and history exams. Then she gathered the support of her brother, her father, and even the sour-faced and strict physics teacher who lived in their complex. After convincing all of them, she finally went to her mother and told her how all of these people, her brother, father, and neighbor, the physics teacher, were on her side. Her mother listened to her reason and saw that everyone else was supporting her. So she finally said yes. Neha won the campaign. Just like Neha, but of course on a grander scale, the Mughal rulers were also very determined to have their way. They ruled over Delhi, Agra, and the rest of the Indian subcontinent for 2 centuries. Let us find out about their methods and tactics through this video. The Mughal rulers wanted to rule lands and territories which were ruled by other kings. But not all kings were ready to accept the Mughals as the new rulers. They did not want to give away their kingdoms. How did the Mughals deal with this resistance or opposition from other kings? They constantly campaigned against them and targeted other kingdoms where their rule would be accepted more easily. In this way, the Mughals grew very powerful. Now, the kings who had opposed them earlier acquiesced or joined them easily. They saw that it would be beneficial for them if they were on friendly terms with powerful rulers. The Rajput dynasties were one such dynasty who developed friendly relations with the Mughals for political benefit. The Mughals married the daughters of the Rajputs. In turn, they gave the Rajputs high and honorable positions. Maryam-uz-Zamani was a Kachwaha princess who married the Mughal ruler Akbar. She gave birth to the Mughal ruler Jahangir. The Mughals were clever and intelligent governors. They treated their opponents with respect after defeating them. They did not humiliate or shame them for losing. This helped them control or influence many kings and chieftains like the Sisodia Rajputs of Mewar. But like all human beings, the Mughal rulers too made mistakes. They did not behave justly and politely all the time. The Mughal ruler Aurangzeb insulted or humiliated the Maratha chieftain Shivaji. Shivaji escaped from Agra, announced that he was an independent ruler, and then started campaigning against or opposing the Mughals. Aurangzeb could have easily won over Shivaji, but he lost his chance by insulting Shivaji. The Mughals made mistakes and took wrong political decisions. They still left a mark in all spheres of the Indian society, in politics, culture, religion, architecture, and administration. The Mughals lived in the Red Fort at Delhi. The Prime Minister of India still addresses the nation from the ramparts of the Red Fort on Independence Day. The Mughal system of governance and administration was very famous. It was followed by many rulers who succeeded or came after the Mughals. Let us find out about this system. Firstly, the Mughals did not believe in the rule of primogeniture. Primogeniture is a system of tradition where the eldest son inherits the father's estate or property. The Mughals followed coparcenary inheritance, in which the father divides his property among all his sons. The Mughals had a vast empire, so they needed governors or administrators from different backgrounds and regions. This helped them rule and control different regions better. Mughal employees were known as Mansabdars. Each Mansabdar held a position or rank called a Mansab. Each rank of Mansabdar had different military responsibilities and a specific salary. Zat was a numerical value ascribed to a Mansabdar to determine his rank. Mansabdars with higher Zat had higher salaries and more responsibilities. The Mansabdars maintained a number of cavalrymen or soldiers called Sawar. Each Mansabdar reviewed the work of the Sawar and paid his salary. He got the Sawar registered and his horses branded. The salary of the Mansabdar came from the revenue collected from a Jagir or a plot of land. The Mansabdar could serve in any part of the country while receiving the revenue of a Jagir from another part of the country. In Akbar's reign, the Jagirs were very carefully reviewed. As a result, the Mansabdars collected revenue equal to their salaries from a Jagir. This revenue collection had become very disorganized by the time of Aurangzeb's rule. The revenue system during Akbar's rule was known as Zabt. So how was the system fixed? Akbar's revenue minister, Todar Mal, made a careful survey of the crop fields, the price of crops, and areas of cultivation for a 10-year period between 1570 and 1580. With this data, they fixed the tax on each crop in cash. The income of the Mughal emperor came from the produce of the peasants. The kings collected the taxes from the peasants through the zamindars. The zamindars could be village headmen or powerful chieftains. There were different offices during Akbar's rule. The empire was divided into provinces called subes. A sube was governed by the subedar. The subedar was supported by the military paymaster or the bakshi, the sadar in charge of religious practices, the military commanders called faujdars, and the kotwal who were the town police commanders. Each province also had a financial officer called Diwan. Akbar's close friend and courtier Abul Fazl wrote about Akbar's reign in a 3-volume history book called Akbarnama. The third volume, Ain-e Akbari, is especially interesting with details of Akbar's administration and the traditions and cultures of the common people. Akbar was liberal and open-minded in religious matters. He was interested in different religions and faiths. He had discussions on religion with the ulama, who are the guardians of religious knowledge in Islam, as well as with the Roman Catholic priests, the Brahmanas, and the Zoroastrians. After all these discussions, he founded the idea of Shul-e-Kul, or universal peace. Akbar's vision of religion was founded on principles of honesty, tolerance, justice, and peace. Jahangir and Shah Jahan also followed Shul-e-Kul. The Mughal Empire was rich and prosperous. However, international visitors also pointed out that many people lived in poverty. The rulers and the highest-ranking noblemen only formed a small percentage of the total population. After the 17th century, the power and influence of the Mughal rulers slowly decreased. Their servants began to rule over provinces in Hyderabad and Awadh. Afterwards, they formed dynasties and became independent rulers. We will end our video for today with a timeline of the Mughal emperors so that you have a better idea about the age. The Mughals were descendants of the Mongol ruler Genghis Khan from their mother's side. From their father's side, they were the descendants of Timur, who was the ruler of Iran, Iraq, and modern-day Turkey. The Mughals were proud of their ancestor Timur, who had captured Delhi in 1398. However, they did not like their Mongol ancestry because Genghis Khan was infamous for massacring many people. In this lineage of all-male rulers, Nur Jahan, the 20th wife of the Mughal ruler Jahangir, deserves special mention. She was a great administrator, poet, hunter, advisor, and a very powerful ruler. Gold and silver coins, which bore her name opposite that of Jahangir, began to circulate in 1617. Do try and find out more about Noor Jahan and about the architecture and the coins of this very interesting age. See you soon in our other videos. Till then, happy learning!